Okay, let's get going. I was told this morning, and I should have realized it originally, that some people won't be here today because they're at the Israel Day Parade, which I guess is kicking off right now at this hour. I was never a big fan of it, even though I ran it one year. This year, I think it's important that a lot of people show up and show off or up, however you want to look upon it, the wonderful mayor that New York has who is not attending the parade. But leave that part aside. Any rate, we have enough problems here. You all can deal with your New York problems and the other problems in New York. We'll leave that for aside for another discussion some other day. In any case, um, I really, was hoping to not have any more quote unquote war briefings. We had enough. 3 years worth, just about. We're going to be pushing. This is going to be June tomorrow, so we're at 2 years and 9 months. So like I was saying, my watch goes off every few minutes at this point, which is saying there is either a drone attack or a missile attack in northern Israel, uh, and it's pretty constant. It's actually more constant in some ways than it was during the middle of the actual war. Well, this is actually a war, but that's besides the point. It's called the War of the Ceasefire. That's what it's called here. This is a ceasefire and a war is going on. President Trump declared a ceasefire, but I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean. It means Israel shouldn't attack Beirut more than anything else because the Iranians would be upset. Um, I actually don't think we should attack Beirut necessarily because I don't think it accomplishes anything besides giving international media more terrible pictures of things we've done. But we'll leave that part aside. The Israeli public or the Israeli commentators are mostly convinced we're fighting with our hands tied behind our back in Lebanon. The other side of the people saying is, what are we fighting at all? Why are we there? Today was a big deal in the morning. Israel once again captured the Balfour, which is a Crusader fort in southern Lebanon. It was a fort that was captured during the first Lebanon War with a lot of casualties. I don't remember the exact number, but I think at least 13 Israeli soldiers died capturing it the first time. Obviously, this time was captured without any casualties, but made a big deal of it. And the army distributed pictures, and um, Netanyahu gave a statement about how we've, things have a dramatic change by the fact that we've gotten Balfour again, for the third time. Uh, it's sad. Now, the problem is no one has any really better strategies. In other words, it's not like someone said, well, why don't we do this or why don't we do that? We shouldn't have been doing this in the first place. Our situation in Lebanon is much worse than it was before the Second Iran War began. We stated, the government said, aha, they've fallen into our trap by firing on us at the beginning of the war. We should have ignored it or done some sort of symbolic response. But instead, we thought this was a great opportunity to eliminate Hezbollah. The fact that we didn't have the ability to eliminate Hezbollah doesn't seem to bother anybody. And the fact that they had new technologies that we should have known they had and we did not have a response for. In other words, the drones that are controlled by fiber optic lines also didn't seem to bother anybody or didn't bother the right people at the right time. Instead, we made bombastic statements that we're going to disarm Hezbollah once and for all. We're going to finish off Hezbollah. And of course, none of that is happening. None of that really can happen because, the only way to, disband Hezbollah in total is to capture all of Lebanon. We got to go all the way up north, capture all of Lebanon. There's only one teeny, teeny little problem with it. We don't have the soldiers to do it. If that was our main goal starting October 7th or whatever it might have been 2.5 years ago, it was a achievable, difficult but achievable goal. But at this point, we have reservists who are in 200, 250 days a year, are at their wits' end. A lot of them are not showing up at this point. We have regular soldiers who were drafted after October 7th, and have been fighting nonstop throughout their service. This has never happened to Israel before. It's never happened to Israeli soldiers before. They've been literally fighting nonstop, whether they've been moved from Gaza to Syria to Lebanon and back again. It has been nonstop now for this whole period of time. The army is exhausted. The army, they just aren't soldiers. It just doesn't exist. There aren't the people to do what the government has decided we should be doing. I've written it before, but I need to stress it. After October 7th, the conclusion that people made don't forget, there has been no commission of inquiry, there's been no serious discussion, there's been no discussions of different options or how to look upon things, but the decision was made that our defense strategy before October 7th was wrong, and that what we have to be doing in any given time is if there's a potential threat, we have to eliminate it before they attack us. In other words, we don't have to defend against it, we have to eliminate it. Well, guess what? They all want to kill us, right? I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but obviously, but there are lots and lots of enemies out there in the Middle East who do not like us. We can keep on trying to destroy all of them before they destroy us, quote unquote. What that will mean is we really will become Sparta that Netanyahu talked about, fighting at all times, and it just doesn't work. The whole defense strategy of Israel from Ben Gurion's time forward was always the fact we have to fight short wars. We're dependent on reservists who cannot spend years in the army. We don't have a standing army that's all that large, although it's much larger than it was in my time. And we have to fight short, quick wars, win quick victories, translate the military victories into whatever diplomatic solutions we can come up with, but something, and move on and have a period of peace, a period for the economy to recover, a period for the country to recover. There hasn't been a time for anyone to recover. I was thinking about the people up north. I mean, they had a few months of quiet, relatively speaking, and they have now had, I guess it's now probably 12 weeks practically of nonstop firing. 12 weeks when their kids, some of them have gone to school, sometimes they've gone to school under fire, and now they're not going to school at all in many cases. 12 weeks and with no particular assistance. Most of these people have not gotten economic assistance from the first war, has not come through yet. I'm not talking, in other words, for the year and a half that they were away, that didn't come through. A lot of it hasn't come through yet, and other things have not come through. And meanwhile, their businesses are closed. They're having a hard time operating, and of course, lots of people have not come back because it's not a safe place at the moment. What was discussed for those people was you can come back. There'll be difficulties and challenges in terms of education and in terms of medical care and all those things that the North has always had problems with. But at least now you'll have safety. Now, the reality was the last war ended in a complete victory. I'm talking about with Hezbollah. Hezbollah was deterred. The agreement that we had prior to this war was that we were holding on to a number of different locations inside southern Lebanon, and we had the ability to attack any Hezbollah who was violating the agreement, who was south of the Litani. We attacked, killed them. During this period of time, we killed about 300 Hezbollah fighters during this period of time. Now, yes, the Lebanese army did not succeed in disarming Hezbollah like they're supposed to. But let's be realistic. The Lebanese army never had the ability to disarm Hezbollah. And so all this talk, you hear it time and time again. Every time there's a firing on Kiryat Shmona, we need to take down a building in Beirut. Okay, we'll take down a building in Beirut. What will that accomplish exactly? Will that stop Hezbollah? Will it put more pressure on the Lebanese government to try to do something? Yes, it'll put more pressure on the Lebanese government to try to do something that they can't do. They don't have the ability to take on Hezbollah. They do not want another civil war. Now, the whole hope was that the Iran war would end differently, that the Iranian regime was going to fall. And if the Iranian regime fell, then Hezbollah would lose its funding sources. And considering the fact that the current government in Syria is anti-Hezbollah, that maybe that would allow Hezbollah to die on the vine. But as we know, the war in Iran did not go as one would have hoped. And the Iranian regime does not look like it's going to fall anytime soon. Maybe someday it will, but it's not going to fall anytime soon. And therefore, and we'll get into Iran in a minute, the Hezbollah will continue to get funding from Iran going forth. And so they're going to be there. And we need to find a way, I won't say live with them, but to some extent live with them. There was long periods of time when they were deterred. We need to get back to that situation again. We cannot fight and kill all our enemies all the time because we cannot be in a perpetual war. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work from a societal standpoint. It doesn't work from the perspective of people investing in this country. It doesn't work in terms of high-tech companies that decide to slowly move overseas. Now, it's complicated. There's issues of the shekel, which I've mentioned, I've written about, that's become ridiculously strong, so much so that it's 20% higher against the dollar than it was a year ago, which means the companies that raised $10 million, it's only worth $8 million now, that their products are they get their income in dollars and their engineers are being paid in shekel salaries. So it's much more difficult, but I will leave that part aside. But endless wars do not induce additional economic growth, despite the fact that we've managed somehow. Now, there are some companies that are doing really, really well. Our defense companies, the large ones, and now a lot of the small ones doing extremely well, both because the army is buying from them in tremendous amounts and because uh, European, Asian customers are constantly buying. If you read the Tel Aviv the diary on a regular basis, only one of the companies that are major defense manufacturers are public companies, and that's Elbit. So whenever there's a sale, they actually announce it. They don't announce who it is from. It's always a Asian customer, a European customer. We don't know who they are, but sometimes you can make guesses, sometimes you can't. And they do announce when the U.S. Army or Navy or Marines buys from them. But those are constant and they're growing, and Elbit has done extremely well. So is Israel Aircraft Industry, so is Rafael, and so have a host of small tech startups. But war is generally not good for business. Let's put it that way. It's not good for investment, and it's certainly not good for the daily lives of high-tech workers. Some of them are in the reserves many days a year. And again, we're talking about combat soldiers who've done on average of 200 days. That's the norm. I mean, the official number is 100, but no one's keeping to the 100. And there's a limit. There's just a limit. This just can't keep on going on. And there is no attempt to modify our defense strategy to what our abilities are. It's like there's an endless pit of manpower now. Everyone's talking about drafting the ultra orthodox. I'm 100% in favor of drafting the ultra orthodox. There is no reason why they don't serve. However, they're not about to serve. Let's be realistic here. If they're going to serve, it's a multi-year project that will take many years to get more and more of them to serve. It'll require drying up their fiscal supports. It'll require major societal efforts to do it. It will eventually happen to a greater or lesser degree, but it's not something that's going to happen anytime soon, which means it won't provide any relief for soldiers right now. We won't get any more soldiers. And frankly, by the time we get more ultra-Orthodox soldiers, we'll probably have robot soldiers. But that's a whole other story. But uh, there's no good solution. The solution is to develop a defense strategy that matches our abilities. And I won't even begin to talk about our financial abilities. We don't have an unlimited pool of money. And it's especially because nothing was done during this war to cut back other things like the money that's given to the ultra Orthodox, the money that's given for all sorts of funds for parties and everything else. There was no attempt to raise taxes. Now, I'm not saying raising taxes is a good economic decision considering where Israel stands at the moment, but you need to do something. And, other than a 1% increase in VAT that took place, nothing has been done to try to raise taxes and to sort of say this is a wartime economy. We need to do something. No, we're just spending money and spending manpower as if there's an indefinite pool for it. And that's just more than a little dangerous, to say the least. Now, that's all in Lebanon. Let's turn to Iran. One of the interesting things on Israeli television these last couple of days is they'd have an update on what's going on with Iran. And before it would begin, one of the newscasters would say, "This is live. This is from today. No, I'm not rebroadcasting what I said a week ago." Because that's exactly what it feels like. We're in this endless loop. Um, every day, President Trump announces an agreement is close by, an agreement will be soon, an agreement will be. And of course, those agreements don't come. Israel is hoping it never comes because any agreement is going to be bad for Israel. There's absolutely no doubt that the end result of this war will be a disaster for Israel because whatever happens, and assuming we get the uranium out, at least the enriched, highly enriched uranium, the Iranians are going to get a lot of money. A lot of money is going to be enough money to rebuild whatever was destroyed. It's going to be enough money to straighten out their economy, to decrease the chances of a revolt by the people there. Um, they are going to be able to really reignite much of what went. And on top of everything else, we know that something else terrible happened in a way that the people don't understand. After the failure of this war, no one can imagine the United States once again intervening in Iran. So, what happens if the Iranians start breaking out towards a nuclear bomb? Well, previously, the American administrations, including the Obama administration, said they would act militarily. But does anyone believe that now, and the administration after this failure is going to act militarily? And that's assuming that Trump is still president, who still likes us. Whoever's going to be president after Trump will not like us as much. That's all I can say. I don't know who it's going to be, but whoever it is, and I'm certainly all know that I'm not a big Trump supporter, but in terms of Israel, I would imagine that any president who will be after Trump is not going to be as pro-Israel as either Biden or Trump has been, and that's going to be another step. On top of which, the Iranians are going to be less afraid of us. After all, we did our best. We had complete control of the air and everything else. And in the end, we couldn't even do enough that would really endanger the regime. There's a limit. And again, I don't understand how people don't learn the most basic law of warfare that goes back to World War II and before. You do not win wars from the air. You need air power so you don't lose a war. But without ground troops, there's no way to win a war. World War II, I've written this before. In World War II, up until beginning of 1945, Germany's industrial output kept on rising. Despite day and night bombing by the United States and Great Britain, it had no major impact on their industrial output. Only once US troops crossed the Rhine and started literally capturing the factories did their output decrease and, of course, come to a complete end. Vietnam, can we think of all of the, rolling thunder, and I don't even remember all the different terms we had for bombing of North Vietnam, and that was going to win the war. Did any of them work at all? No, none of them worked. And we can go on and on. Yes, the bombing in Iraq and in both Iraq 1 and Iraq 2 was very successful. But what was it successful for? It was a preemption for the ground assault. It made the ground assault much, much easier. So, but what brought down Saddam Hussein's regime? It wasn't the bombing; it was U.S. troops entering Baghdad. I'm afraid that's the only way you can bring about regime change. But we don't learn the lessons. I mean, whether Israel or the United States, the lessons are clear, and yet we didn't learn those lessons. And now we're in an impossible situation because it's quite clear that President Trump wants out. He was expecting a short war, and of course, it's not turned into a short war. The price of gasoline is where it is. I have to say, he's done a good job of managing it, and every time it seems to be rising, he talks about an immediate ceasefire. Well, there's already a ceasefire, but a settlement is around the corner. The straits will be open, blah blah blah, and the price of oil has stayed within reasonable boundaries and not gone to ridiculously high numbers. But still, It's much higher. Americans don't like paying what they're paying at the gas pumps, and the world is hurting in terms of the world economy. So he wants out, and he wants out badly. And of course, the Iranians know that. Each time he threatened Iran to go back into fight, and each time he backed off at the last minute, the Iranians understand the fact that it's very unlikely, not zero likelihood. I mean, I have to admit there are a few times in the last 3 weeks when I went to sleep thinking there was going to be an attack overnight, but every time there wasn't. And the Iranians are finding the same thing. And they understand the fact that it's not likely to happen. So he wants out. The Iranians know it. It will take a bit longer, maybe maybe another week, maybe 2 weeks. Now that's good. And it's better. It's better if no agreement was ever reached, because the Iranian regime is really hurting from the blockade. But I don't think the United States is going to sustain it. I don't think Trump is going to sustain it. So whatever ends up happening, it will be a net defeat, actually. We'll have destroyed, this many factories and this many this and that, but all of that can be rebuilt. And with the money the Iranians will get with with lifting of sanctions, they'll rebuild everything quickly, and they'll start funding Hezbollah, which should never stop, by the way, but they'll keep on funding Hezbollah. They'll do whatever they can for Hamas, and it will continue. So our situation is considerably worse than it was when we started this war. The first war was successful. The first war in Lebanon was successful. It was the second time. I'm afraid people got a little bit too confident or overconfident and thought they could achieve even more. And of course, my own personal view is Netanyahu also needs the war to keep on going for lots of political reasons. Which brings me to Gaza. Gaza, we have a situation where Hamas refuses to disarm. They see no reason to disarm because no one's going to force them to disarm. Trump had a wonderful plan, 20-point but it stopped as soon as Hamas refuses to disarm. What do you do now? I certainly think the best bet is to keep Gaza isolated, to make sure that they have enough food, enough water, enough all of those type of things. There are no humanitarian disasters, but no money goes in to rebuild Gaza until Hamas agrees to disarm. Let the people of Gaza pressure and do what's necessary, and if they don't, so they won't. So Gaza will remain in ruins, and they won't be a threat to us. That's the reality. The fact is they control 98% of the population, but only about 30% of the land. All of it is far from our borders. The only problem is we have to have troops in between, and that takes more troops. Going back to my earlier story, everything takes troops. We don't have enough, but we'll leave that part aside. But there's a lot of pressure here. There's a lot of talk, especially amongst the right-wing part of this government and even Netanyahu. We need to go back in and finish off Hamas. The only problem of finishing off Hamas is it will probably take 2 years, 2 more years of fighting to finish off Hamas. And I don't want to think about the pictures in the world news, etc. It'll be back in the news. Genocide, which never quite left, will be very much in the forefront of the news because Hamas will continue to use their population as a shield. The fact that Hamas was supposed to disarm and wouldn't will completely disappear from any sort of explanations. It'll be Israel who's attacking Hamas once again, Israel who's killing civilians once again, and that's what we'll be. I think it's a bad move. I think isolate them as best as we can on the world stage, isolate them physically, and hope they will, to some extent, lose control over a period of time. It's not a perfect strategy, but I think it's a much better strategy than going in and trying to disarm them. And again, sending in those same soldiers who've been fighting for 3 years to fight for another year or two is a very bad strategy for this country, in my opinion. Talking about strategy for this country, everything, of course, now comes down to the fact that elections are coming either in September or October. It's still not clear. I think we now are into the October because unless a date is set in the next day or two, they have to give 90 days notice. So from May 1st, it's going to be pushed. The earliest elections can be as the beginning of September, but that, as of tomorrow, it can't be September 1, which was one of the dates. So it'll be down to September 15th or some dates in October. Somehow, Netanyahu is maintaining some support. It hasn't gone down as drastically as one would think. The reality is it's very hard. Um, if you're Netanyahu, what is your claim? What have you accomplished? You'll say that only I can maintain what security, which he did so well over the last 3 years. What he'll claim, and he keeps on claiming, is he transformed the Middle East. Well, he did made some transformations, but I'm not sure ultimately it was better for us, this new transformation. Most people are beginning to see it, and but what that will result at the election box or the election kalfi, which is where you go to vote. I don't know. Um, there is a strong wave at this point for Gadi Eisenkot, who has gone in the polls from about 6 seats to 17 and growing every week by a day or two, excuse me, by a seat or two, and to the point where he will probably pass the combination of Bennett and Lapid, who combined a few weeks ago. Will probably pass them, in my opinion, in the coming weeks to be the largest opposition party in terms of the polls. I personally like him. I've been working a little bit for him. Um, and mostly I like him because I believe he can gain support where the others can't. He is unfortunately has a story of being a Al Shakul. He lost his son in the war. He himself was chief of staff. He's Moroccan, which crosses all sorts of lines. And in my experience that I wrote about 2 weeks ago in canvassing with him in the Shulchan Carmel, the um, the interest in him was very high. People said they were voting for him, and even the Likud people who said, "Well, I'm Likud, but I love Gadi," was very unique, and none of the other candidates will have that. He doesn't have the same political experience as some of his opponents, and maybe that's good. Um, he is someone who people can love. This country needs to love a new leader. And he's quiet and he's determined and he's smart. And I think he will get the right people surrounding him to make decisions. Netanyahu at the moment has almost no one surrounding him. He doesn't have a head of the National Security Council. He has almost no advisors of any significance, and no one thinks his defense minister is anyone worthy of that title. So all decisions are being made by Netanyahu pretty much solo. Leaving aside everything else, whether you like or hate Netanyahu, it's not the way to make important decisions. Decisions should be made based on talking about what the options are, what are the negatives. Someone needs to bring up what the potential pitfalls will be, weigh the alternatives. Someone needs to be analyzing the risk factors. No one is doing risk factor analysis, as far as I can tell. And of course, that's why we are where we are, because no one understood the risks of some of the decisions we made recently. We took big risks, took big swings, and we missed. And that's why we stand where we are. Okay, we're at the halfway point, and so at this point, to open up for questions, raise your hand. Hopefully, I'll see you. Um, any rate, I see a question in the comments. Trump likes us, but another won't like us as much. For most people in much country, it is our actions to support human life. Okay. Can we bring the world of nations back? It's going to be a long process on two levels. First of all, don't think what happened in terms of our support in the world just happened just because of our actions. Let's keep in mind there was a plan. The Hamas believed and wanted to use civilians. They thought that every civilian death worked on their behalf. And so they encouraged civilian deaths. And they did all they can to maximize civilian deaths. That being said, we did not fight this war with enough thought thoughtfulness as to public opinion in the world. Now, you can't fight a war only thinking of public opinion, but that has to be a really integral part of your fighting, of what you're doing. And I've written many times about the fact that we failed to take actions that would have improved our image and would have improved our status in the world. And of course, we have ministers who keep on saying stupid, stupid things. You know, even yesterday, I think it was Ben-Gvir who said we have to level Beirut. I mean, really? But they said throughout the war, they made statements that didn't help us. And we have a government that hasn't helped, that didn't know how to play the public opinion. We have a prime minister who, because he's so good at English, thinks all he needs to do is give an interview and the whole world will listen. Of course, it doesn't quite work that way. And he alone cannot be the person only doing public relations. And so, but it's more than public relations. It's an actual attitude that's most important. Mick.
Hey, Mark, how you doing? It's good to hear from you. Um, First, I was good to hear one bit of optimism I felt I sensed in your voice was about Gadi Eisenkot. So hopefully that's true. Is that something that you feel optimistic about in terms of
Yes.
the?
Yeah, I mean, I feel
Okay.
optimistic again, we don't know. I never want to write off Netanyahu because he's a great politician. He's a much greater politician than he is a leader. Uh,
Mm,
but so I wouldn't write him off until election day or election night, let's put it that way. But
mm,
Eisenkot is a possible wave candidate. He's unique, and like I said, not only from the polls, literally from walking with him through
mm.
Shuk Carmel, I felt something very different that I've never seen from any other politician in Israel recently, to say the least. Anyway, go ahead.
Good. Well, anyway, it's good to hear. It's good to hear something optimistic from you, an otherwise downtrodden report. So the other thing is what could we do from here? What could Americans who care about Israel care about you? What can we do from here that's productive and not counterproductive? Thank
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I think first and foremost, somehow American jury needs to take over the whole quote unquote Hasbara operation. I always thought that. I thought that going back 50 years. 50 years ago, and literally 50 years ago, even more, there's more than that. Um, my father had a company that did consumer advertising, and he had an advertising agency, and I was got friendly with the head of the advertising agency, and he was a nice Jewish guy. And Israel was having problems in terms of Hasbara. This goes back to the early 70s or yeah, early 70s. And I spoke to him and I said, "Are you willing to get some of your cohorts together and take on the issue of PR for Israel?" And he was more than willing to do it. And then I set him up with a meeting with someone from the World Zionist Organization. And I said, listen, these people are willing to do these things. And they basically said, oh, we know better. We don't need help from anybody. And well, we've seen how much they've known better all these years. So the answer, I think, first and foremost, is there. I don't think it can be left to Israel. I don't care which government we get. First of all, it's going to be way too busy dealing with the multitude of issues that we have here at the moment than to really deal in a serious way with the whole issue of Hasbara. Now, I think it's much more than the issue of Hasbara. I think, and as some of you have learned on your, basarchem, in other words, on the meat of your bones, you've learned it personally. Uh, we have a generation of Jewish kids who go off to college and don't have the historic background to even know when they're being told truths and when they're being told um, nonsense and propaganda. And so one of the things I think I believe in right now, and I'm just passing, I'm not totally convinced, but I think it's something worth exploring, is a really, really significant effort at education amongst Jewish high school students. Uh, Not just, oh, come visit Israel, beautiful country, etc. No, I'm talking about serious history. Now, I know me in history, I've been trying to teach kids history my whole life, and sometimes not all that successful. But I believe that before college kids go off to college, we need to make sure that that they have basic historic understanding, and they understand the fact that as much as we've made mistakes over the years, that it's been primarily the Palestinians who've turned down any possibility of statehood time and time again, and that they have agency in this conflict. And it's not like they've had no agency at any given time. And I think that's very important. I think they need to have that understanding so that when they go into a class and all they hear about is the colonialism of Israel, they can at least, if not fight back verbally, at least mentally understand the fact they're being sold uh, a lot of goods, and they have to understand that. And it's going to be very, very problematic. A friend of mine was an academician, did a literature search recently on new articles that have been published in the last 2 years about Israel. And basically, every single one of them was the same article about how Israel's a colonial state. This is from all sorts of, academicians, young academicians who have to publish to perish, so to speak. And they're all publishing the same story. And so we can expect that the next, 10, 15, 20 years, as kids go off to college, they're going to get even worse education vis-a-vis Israel. And I think we need to prepare them for that. Obviously, we need to go beyond the Jewish population, but we need to start with who we have our hands on. Let's start with the easy part. Let's make sure that the kids in the Jewish day school, high schools, have that education, because I think often they don't. And then beyond that, find ways of reaching Jewish high school students uh, who are not um, who are not in Jewish day schools. Um, I think that's very important. I think we need to find the ways of doing that before they get to college, before it's too late. And then beyond that is a general communication strategy that's needed, and it needs a coordination. It needs to be thoughtful. And of course, let's hope there's a better government here that'll make it easier. I'm hopeful it'll be a better government. It won't be simple because the country as a whole um, has moved to the right. The number of people supporting a Palestinian state and is very small. And I'm not even one of them who thinks that anytime soon there can be a Palestinian state. And that's what everyone wants to hear. It was easy post Oslo to get support abroad because we were talking about a peace process, and it's going to be very difficult to get some sort of peace process going. But we'll need to do something, and we'll need support in order to do it. That's what I could say right now. Um, any rate, um, I see someone said we have to get kids younger than high school. Yes, we need to get younger than high school. Um, but again, that's a question of most of these kids. A lot of kids are in some sort of Hebrew school, successful, not so successful, in uh, all sorts of synagogues, conservative, reform, etc. Unfortunately, the priority there is not to teach Israel history. It's to teach, so they can go up and do a good job on their bar mitzvah. Um, Maybe an effort needs to be made in that direction. The problem is there aren't people who are qualified to teach. That's part of the problem. I've thought of creating all sorts of multimedia tools, but who's going to use them? And that's um, people don't seem to use my tools. What can I tell you? But yes, we need to go after younger as well. And yes, there's propaganda going on in elementary schools. I don't know. I mean, it's very depressing. Sorry, Mick. It seems very depressing on a very large scale. Um, Zionism cannot be left to the religious. Agreed 100%. Zionism is a secular movement. We need to say that again and again and again. Zionism was not a religious movement to begin with. Zionism was started by people who may have had some sort of religious background, usually from their parents, but they left their parents, they became secular Jews, and they created the state. Primarily, the founders of this country were primarily secular Jews with a small smattering of modern Orthodox, so to speak, who participated in the Zionist world, but they were a small smattering. That's why there are only a small number of religious Zionist kibbutzim versus hundreds of non-religious Zionist kibbutzim, because that was the reality back then. The religious have um, had a plan on how to take over the idea of Zionism and to say that they're the real Zionists, which is more than a little problematic because the inherent part of Zionism was not believing in the Messiah, believing that we can't wait for the Messiah, whether you were religious or not. The Messiah was not coming anytime soon, and Jews had to take their fate into their own hands, and that meant um, creating a state, creating an army, and doing all the things that was necessary in order to get this state started. Okay, anyone else? Someone is asking, how do you take the educational content taught by Steve Copeland or Stu Wagner and make it social media friendly? Okay, I'm not familiar with that content. Susan, I would love you to send me afterwards a link to some of that content so I could take a look at it. Um, there are people who know how to do these things. That's not me. I mean, I'm not a Luddite, and I have, all the social media accounts except except for one, because my son won't let me because the Chinese spying system. But we'll leave that part aside. Um, but we need people who are an expert in it. Uh, so, um, but there are people who are good at that, and find the right people, fund the right people. Again, I think funding this is important. Again, this is not a short-term thing. I'm not saying run out tomorrow and fund something. I'm actually talking to a group of people here, um, starting to talk to them, and we're sort of saying, well, right now all of our efforts have to go to the election. But we think, I certainly think that
Think that our relations,
our
our
relations,
relations,
Mike,
uh,
whoever just unmuted, mute yourself again a second because our relations with the United States are a five-alarm fire, and we need to do all we can in order to at least bring it down to a one-alarm fire. Um, Israeli public is to a limited extent aware of that right now. Limited extent because the TV news on the main channels talks about it a little more. Of course, the people listening to the government, like Channel 14, have no idea because, as far as they're concerned, everything is perfect. But everybody else understands there's a problem. They don't understand how critical that problem is. Anyway, whoever wanted to ask the question, please go ahead. I think Michael or not.
Mark, I have a question. I was in New York City a few days ago because my daughter just moved there. And some of her Jewish friends were quoting the mayor saying that he wasn't marching today only because of policies of Netanyahu, not because of existential issues about Israel. And if only there was a new prime minister, then he would march. But I can't find any evidence that that's actually
He
true.
never said that whatsoever. I'm sorry. He is against the existence of Israel as a Jewish state, period. There is no such thing that he said he's against the current government and he'd be happy to support a different government. He hasn't said that in any which way.
Mm.
They're making that up because it's comfortable to hear that, but it's not the case. The man does not believe Israel should exist as a Jewish state, which inherently say that the Jewish people are the only people in the world who are not entitled to their own state is in itself anti-Semitic. Beth, unmute.
Oh, me? Sorry.
Okay.
Mark,
Yes.
I have a question. It's more of a personal question, and I realize you don't have the definite answer, but I'm supposed to be flying to London on June 15th. And just with whatever crystal ball you have, how confident, what should my level of confidence be in terms of that flight going out?
Reasonable. I'm supposed to fly somewhere else a few days later for 5 days. We're planning to go at the moment. Look, I went to the States a few weeks ago, and I was concerned the moment I left, I was concerned was I making a trip, was I making a mistake? And throughout the whole trip, I was worried, am I going to get back? And then when I got on the plane, there was talk of a war starting that night. And talking to the LL crew, they were concerned that we get there before Ben Gurion closes. Well, I've been back 2 weeks and Ben Gurion hasn't closed, and so you can assume it'll be okay, and you never know. I mean, first of all, I would never fly anything but El Al right now.
Right.
Don't if you're planning to come in and out of Israel, don't fly anything but El Al. I mean, you can if you want fly Arkia or Israel, Not that I have anything against them, but they're smaller airlines and they have smaller fleets. And when things go wrong, they don't have the size of the fleet in order to make up for problems. So I would limit myself to El Al. As best as one can tell, look, the only such scenario is if Trump decides to go back to war.
Yeah.
Just don't see it. I see more just waiting. Now, the Iranians made a ridiculous threat today. It said if the United States doesn't remove its blockade, then Iran will remove it by military force. That's just talking. It's not possible. They have
Right.
no military means of attacking the U.S. Fleet that's not right off their lands. It's 100 kilometers away, and the U.S. has the ability to defend all its ships, and so it's not going to happen. So
On the El Al
Hi,
thing,
Mark. This is Claude. I'm sorry to cut in, but I'm on a phone. Did you see the Thomas Friedman article recently? My conservative friends, right-wing friends, considered it defeatist garbage. Did you get a chance to see it?
yeah, I read
About
it. I mean, what does it mean, defeatist garbage? I mean,
That's
look,
what they said. They said in Israel that Israelis don't feel that way whatsoever. That they feel the war was a big positive.
no. I mean, I don't think that I know of anyone who thinks um, that the war at this point was a big positive. It may work out that way in the end, but no one at this point thinks it's a big positive. What was the positive result of this war so far? Um, we went into this war and we said regime change, end of support of the proxies, end of the ballistic missile program, and end of the enrichment program. If in the best case scenario right now, we're hoping to remove the enriched uranium, at least the 60%, and maybe the 20% that's not at all clear, and maybe have some sort of system to limit their enrichment for the next X number of years. In other words, back to the JCPOA, which Netanyahu pushed Trump to leave in 2018, I think it was. That's the best situation that we can hope for at this point. So yes, we destroyed X number of Iranian sites, but every one of them can be rebuilt. And yes, we killed Khamenei, a 87-year-old man with cancer. Was that a major success? Killing the leader of Iran, and did that do us any good? I mean, doesn't seem to me it did. So I'm not sure who thinks it was a major success. Could things work?
That's not their point. Their point was that the commentators in Israel are saying that it's been a success.
No, the competitors in Israel are not saying it's been a success at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, on Channel 14, they are. Channel 14, everything is perfect because it's a perfect government. But leaving that aside, I don't see anyone saying it's a great success. I mean, it's taken a while to realize how big a failure it is, but people are beginning to clearly understand that at this point, without a doubt. Okay, someone, iPad 47, you have a question. Unmute.
Oh,
Okay,
that's me. That's me.
go ahead, Beth.
I can't get you. Wait a second.
You're unmuted.
Oh,
Talk.
okay. Okay. Going back to the kids and how you're going to do things. I think waiting till high school is too late. I think it's got to really start at the home and then just work its way through with proper teaching. But like going into New York, I know Sarah lives in New York and she said all her friends who she grew up with, like going to temple or to events or to Israel. Now they're the worst ones, she said. And several of our cousins who've gone, some have gone to yeshiva, some have gone to day school, and they're like, also, they're for the Palestinians. And so I think even with speaking to these kids, it's almost like they don't even want to listen to you. They just put their wall up. And some of the kids that never went anywhere, never were bat mitzvahed, they're pro-Israel. So I don't, and yes, most of Sarah's friends who didn't go to Israel or Hebrew school, they're pro-Israel. So how do you justify all of this?
It's just explaining it now. I don't really have
Yeah.
a good explanation except poor
Yeah.
education.
Yeah, but
I mean, Hebrew school education is notoriously bad.
Right.
There's one study that shows for every year of Hebrew school education, kids get less tied to Judaism. So Hebrew schools have always been traditionally very, very bad. Israel education has always been very bad as well because we don't tell the whole story. In other words, if you want to, if you want to get kids to listen to you as kids, you can't tell the propaganda story. You can't tell the Exodus story. It's a great movie, right? All the kids should watch Exodus. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful movie. But they have to get the whole picture as well, because if they don't have the whole picture from you, then they hear, oh, wait a second. Oh, they were lying to me all along. No, you got to tell the story of the War of Independence. And not that the kids want to listen to things back from 1947, 48. But you need to tell the, I mean, the story of the War of Independence includes Deir Yassin, where we did kill some Palestinians, civilians. There's no question. There were terrible things happened during that war. Most of it on their side, but also on our side. We were not without any sin. Also, in 1948, all they had to do was agree to the partition. If the
Right.
Palestinians would agree to the partition in 1947, there would be no refugees. There would be no war. I can't imagine what history would have been like if they would have just agreed to the partition. But they didn't. And they didn't agree at any point along the way. And now it may be too late. That's a whole other story. But throughout, they did not agree. They never went down from their maximalist demands. So, but you have to talk about the bad as well. You can't
Right.
talk about the perfect Israel because it's not a perfect country. I mean, listen, Israelis and me, I could stand here and attack this government, attack the policies, and talk about what's taking place in the West Bank right now, which I didn't discuss, which are some terrible things, and talk about the rise of racism in this country, which is true and it's happened and it's bad. I could spend the whole hour talking about that. Um, so there are bad things here. It's not, they're good and there's bad, and it's a mixed story. But when everything is said and done, um, more the historic truth lies more with us than on the other side. The fact of the matter is, people have to understand that. And yes, those people who are concerned about the Palestinians, okay, be concerned about the Palestinians, but don't be concerned about the Palestinians to the extent that we're not to think that we don't have any rights either. And that's where we have to go. They let them be concerned. I'm also, I believe the Palestinians are the least deserving a nation on earth or a group on earth to deserve a state. After all, they're the ones who brought about international terrorism, brought about the hijacking of planes. I can go on and on and again, suicide bombers. They were first and foremost in all these wonderful things. They rejected an agreement all the way through. They could have had a state many, many times. Despite all that, I want them to have a state because that's the only real solution that can exist. There is no other solution but two-state solution. But they don't really deserve it. But that's the reality. That's what we have to do as best as we can. Okay, everybody, I thank you. I don't know when we'll listen to, well, depending on whether we have quiet couple of weeks or more war these couple of weeks. We'll either have this again in 2 weeks or in 4 weeks, hopefully in 4 weeks. So thank you all. Those of you who are not paid subscribers, please become a paid subscriber. Like I said, the shekel is getting way too strong. So your dollars go less and less every day. Any rate, have a great couple of weeks, and thank you all for joining me today.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.